The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, and welcome, Steve Negron.
Hi, Carl. How are you, sir?
For House of Representatives down in Washington. You sure you want to go there?
I got to tell you, it has been a lot. That question is asked a lot of me, Carl.
Yeah.
And my answer still is yes. You know, we've gotten to a point now that there really is just, when you look at the polling numbers or the ratings of how many people like Congress, and it's in the teens, right? And so I think we need a new voice. I think we need to build our future, and I'm looking forward to go down there. And, you know, I've been an independent thinker my whole life, and I was that way when we were together in the House. There are sometimes I took votes against our party because it wasn't in the best interest of the Nashville constituents who I work for. And it's going to be the same way in Washington. So I'm ready to go. I think the folks at the 2nd Congressional District are ready for a change, and we're really excited.
Oh, good. When you were in the House here in New Hampshire, you really worked with the Senate. You got bills through.
Yes.
You knew how to do it.
Yeah.
And for a first year, that was amazing. Okay? You did a great job.
Thank you.
And, you know, I think a lot of people appreciated it.
Well, you know, I learned a lot, you know, so there was yourself, Don LeBrun, Dave Murataki, you know, Greg Hill. So I learned a lot from a lot of folks that had been there a while. A lot of times I think you just need to sit back and learn and observe and figure out what's the right way to orchestrate and to navigate yourself through an organization. You know, you can't just jump in there and start blowing things up because you make a fool out of yourself. So I learned a lot. And I think those same traits you can take to Washington. I mean, they only have 35 more representatives than we do, right, in the state house. So, and I think that, you know, everybody's position is a position that you listen to.
Yeah.
My grandmother famously said, you know, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And it's about listening, you know, and I think they've stopped listening. And quite honestly, Carl, on both sides of the aisle, you know, it's just like they're just dug in and nobody wants to listen. And I think it's time for new blood for New Hampshire.
I agree. This is for everything. But you were able to pick up quickly and to start to doing some of the stuff.
Right.
People usually wait at least half the, you know.
Well, you know, I just, having been both in the service and in being in private and industry and then my own business, you know, once you get a feel, then you latch on. You know, it doesn't always necessarily have to be your idea, but you can be helpful to somebody to push legislation through. And in being on the election law committee in 16 through 18, there was a lot of stuff about residency and domicile and college students, you know, and so we did a lot of work. And I was the whip in the committee. So I really learned the fact that, you know, you can work across the aisles. You're not going to get everything you want, but I think it's all about being able to realize that when legislation does get through in a bipartisan fashion, that then the people that you're serving are the ones that benefit from it. So it isn't about you necessarily as a legislator. It's about the people that sent you to, in our case, to Concord.
And you pick up on the issues. What do you hear from the people that you're going talking
Sure. You know, it has been an amazing time. You know, we were kind of held back. And so I had a bunch of college kids. They were like a bunch of thoroughbreds in the starting gate. And they wanted, you know, they wanted to get out. They wanted to go knock doors. But we understand the situation that we were in, and we were following the guidelines that were set. And a lot of people were still a little uneasy all the way back in April timeframe, in June. April and May timeframe. But what we started hearing when we actually started calling, and we started calling a lot, that's who we were reaching out. At the time, it really was a lot of what was happening with COVID. And certainly the biggest issue that we heard was all about public safety in their neighborhoods. Because we saw every day, not just ourselves, but everybody that's in the 2nd Congressional or in the state of New Hampshire, what was happening in Portland, Oregon, or Seattle, Washington, or Kenosha.
Wisconsin.
And Kenosha is 100,000 people.
Yeah,
it's the size of Manchester.
That's right.
And people have realized that, you know what, that we are a land of laws, and this lawlessness that was going on scared a lot of people. And we had representatives that not only failed to condemn those actions that were out there in those places, but quite frankly, actively participated by their tacit silence. And, you know, whether it was Antifa that was out there, not once, and in my case, Representative Custer, Congresswoman Custer, ever denounced that activity. You know, she called it peaceful protest. And quite frankly, you know, I may not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, but when you see people burning and rioting and throwing and having police officers attacked, I don't know how you can categorize that as peaceful protest. And she never once condemned any activity. And that made a lot of people very uneasy here in the state. And then in June, they passed the George Floyd Police Protection Act, which then was alluding to getting rid of qualified immunity for law enforcement. And quite frankly, that was a big mistake on Congresswoman Custer and Pappas's position.
On that one.
We did. And the thing about it is that traditionally the New Hampshire Police Association endorses the Democrats, for a lot of reasons, for union issues, and for those kind of things. But getting rid of qualified immunity was really the one thing that they could not stand. And so they chose, and I'm very fortunate and very honored to give me their endorsement because I knew that I understood that those police officers, men and women every day, they go out there to protect us. In that one heated moment of exchange, when their life is on the line, to be able to know that the people that they were actually pursuing could sue them in court. It is the police officer themselves. What about the families?
Yeah.
So I think that they now know that I support law enforcement, both federal, state, and local. They know that I'll go to Congress and I'll support them, 100%. And I think that was a calculated mistake on the part of Congresswoman Custer. You can't think you know better, and all that. She needed to look at our state and do we have this kind of situation with our law enforcement in the state? And the answer is no. We have tremendous law enforcement here in the great state of New Hampshire. And she chose to look at it from a partisan view, right, from what Nancy Pelosi was telling her. And it really was a slap in the face of a law enforcement here in the great state. But that just tells you that she's actually jumping to the tune of Nancy Pelosi and not listening to the folks of her
not even
district.
knowing that, she's been a resident of the state for a long time. She doesn't know what's there.
Absolutely. And, it was surprising. And then they tried to say that it isn't about, qualified immunity. It's about accountability. And when I talk to police officers and actually talking to retired police chief Russ Ux from Hollis, he goes, look, we police our own. And when we find a police officer that is not working within the guidelines of my department, then we get rid of them. And then we actually then strip them of the ability to get law enforcement jobs after that. So there is accountability in law enforcement, but the left went way too far on this. It has absolutely backfired on them. And they now know that they have a potential congressman that will have their back when I go to Washington.
Yeah, that's good. What other things are they hitting on? Is the economy anything?
The economy is interesting because it's tied to COVID.
Right.
And there's a lot of people out there, Carl, that wants us to get back to a pre-COVID condition. And I now have a saying, I said, I respect COVID, but I don't fear it. And we now know, many months into this pandemic, that there is a population of people that we need to protect. And we should do that. And everything we should do that. But when you take a peanut butter spread approach to everything and everybody, I think it has done a disservice. You hear the left wing Socialist Party, I don't call it the Democratic Party anymore because they're not, they're clamoring that it was this administration's, inability to deal with Corona that has created this issue with the economy. The trick of the matter is it's not the COVID pandemic that's created this issue. It's a response to the pandemic that's created this issue. And look, I'm a small business owner and you've been in business yourself. We got to get back to the engine that turns this economy.
That's right.
And we have to look at, until there's a time where everybody feels more comfortable, we need to open up this economy, take the necessary precautions, but let us get back to living our lives. And, they want to say that we don't care about the people. Look, one death is one too many. But the point is, I was at a rally to try to open up the schools in Nashua. And because now I have parents calling me and saying, can you please help us open up the schools? Children, education is one part. The socialization is so important. Herd immunity is another aspect. And we've completely just disregarded all those because, Congresswoman Custer put out this plan, and this plan was about stay home, wear a mask, don't go out. It was all about fear. It was all about peddling fear. And the truth of the matter is that, yes, it has caused over 225,000 deaths within this country. But when you look at the people that have been infected with this pandemic, what's the mortality rate? Truly, let's be honest with ourselves. this isn't people dying in the middle of the street. Now, people are going to come after me saying, you're so insensitive because, but people die from the flu.
Yeah.
Car
accidents.
Car accidents. And I mean, it's going to happen. I think this happened to be a political football that they took advantage of. The one thing that they could actually attack this president was the economy. I think that's where they've done that. And we were just talking in the office today. It's funny that all the states that have these increase in coronavirus numbers happen to all be in swing states. It's interesting that happens, these states that are so far apart. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but when you look at all these battleground states and all these swing states, why are they the only ones that are showing this increase? I'll leave it up to people to try to make their own decision.
Well, it's something that's hard too. You have, as you say, fear, and you have the need of the economy, which makes our life go, really. And how do you balance that? And I think the president actually did a hard job fairly well. And even from the beginning, most of the Democrats, or the socialists, as you call them, were knocking that and trying to do the opposite. And that would have been wrong.
Right. It's so funny because when he called for the ban on people coming in from China, outside of Americans that are trying to come back into the country from China, they call him a racist. They call him a xenophobe. And it's interesting that same time that the president was banning flights in from China, Congress was signing the articles of impeachment underneath it. If you saw Speaker Pelosi, they had a signing, they had the pens. It was like you're actually signing a bill and you give these ceremonial pens out to people. And there was Jerry Nadler, who was there on the Judiciary Committee. And it's funny to me that nobody wants to go back and look at that. He took a step in overt action to protect his country at the same time they're trying to impeach him. So, we knew that it was a hollow impeachment. We knew we would never get through the Senate. But now they want to go back and now they're criticizing him for stopping the flights. But at the time that he actually did it, they were criticizing him for not. It's just an amazing thing that it's very opportunistic as to what the argument is. And this president has taken heat at every turn, and as I said in my debate with Congresswoman Custer, it isn't about working. It's about obstruction. It's about resisting. It's about really anything the president does, we're against. And to me, that's not legislating. It isn't.
No.
It's just about trying to find a way because that doesn't fit the narrative of the leftist socialist party. And so, and Congresswoman Custer was in tow 100% of the time. And that's not what we're about.
Do you get in discussion about what's happening with some of these social companies that are, on the web and how they're using their own method of discrimination?
Absolutely. That was I don't know if it was the NHPR debate that I had, or it was a Facebook. I forget what it was, but the question was about antitrust, and some of these platforms. I won't get into any names. And I said, yes, we need to look at antitrust, not from a position of a monopoly, but from a position of killing free speech and a First Amendment right. So when you look at some of these platforms, it should be a platform to allow individuals to put their position on and let an open dialogue and exchange of information and ideas happen. When you start suppressing one side, and in my opinion, it's been very clear which side was being suppressed, then absolutely, I do believe that, the government has to take a look at, this is not the intent of this type of platform. It's supposed to be an open social platform. And when you start looking at things, and it's very clear, those that they're suppressing, I think you absolutely have to looking at some sort of antitrust, RICO statutes, because I think some of it is criminal activity to do that. And I think RICO has some applicability here. And it's very obvious that that's something that they want to do. And, they will stand up and yell and scream because they believe that Russia had some sort of interference on these same platforms. I would tell you that some of that same interference is internal. Here within the United States. So be wary of people outside, but never forget Trojan horses inside. And so you're looking at things inside our country.
We saw that in the impeachment.
Absolutely, right? I mean, it's one of those things that, but they won't acknowledge that because they're saying that that's not what they're doing. It's clear that is what they're doing, and so it's funny that they're looking at foreign countries actually trying to sway our election when the actual platforms that we're trying to are doing the exact same thing,
Right.
but from internally. So, but they won't, it doesn't fit their narrative, so they won't talk about it.
So, what are you doing in this last week? What's your big finish here with the flourish?
Well, it is about, we're up on radio now. We're up on both WGIR and WZID. We're still fundraising. So go to Negron, 4Congress.com and donate to try to expand our scope on those radio stations. We're looking at going into the papers and taking out full page ads to show a compare and contrast of what we're doing. The team is still calling independents. That's what we're focusing on right now. Trump Victory has done a phenomenal job to get out the base and talk to those folks. So we feel good. It wasn't about get out the vote. This time it was about persuasion. Why us versus Congresswoman Custer. And I feel really good about it. UNH came out with a poll a week and a half ago, and had us within 4 points. And it was dropped down from 12 to 6 to 4. And the margin of error was 4. So we believe we're in a neck and neck race right now. We think another poll is going to come out this week. We believe that we're actually going to be tied or ahead with Congresswoman Custer. And I think New Hampshire is just ready for a change. And I think what they see is that we bring a fresh voice and a fresh perspective. One of the things that I think that Congresswoman Custer has forgotten is that, what community is she a part of?
Right. Definitely.
I have deep ties to Nashua. For 31 years, I have deep ties to this community and still do. I'm still active in my church. Still active with Knights of Columbus. It's one of those things that I don't ever hear her talk about what's her tie to Hopkinton.
That's true. Yeah.
What is it that she does? I still go to my congregation, Immaculate Conception Church. It's one of those things that, my wife and I have built a life here in New Hampshire, and this is why I do it, because I want this town and every other town in the 2nd Congressional to have the same kind of opportunities that my wife and I have had for the last 31 years. And even locally in the State House, I am praying that in our town of Nashua, that we do very well when it comes to the state elections and the state representatives and Kevin Avard, right, in the Senate, and Mary Ellen McKay, because what you see at the federal level, we're seeing the same thing at a microcosm here in the state. And everybody needs to know that, when you walk into that ballot booth on November 3rd, you need to really consider, do you want higher taxes?
Right.
Do you want this economy to keep on going? Do you want a legislator or legislative body to work with Governor Sununu? Look, he doesn't want to veto all those bills, but he has to veto all those bills because it's bad legislation. So, when those people get in, I would implore everybody, look up and down the ballot, turn it over. There's people on the back. These things are important. And what I have learned over the past 6 years that I've been involved in is that everything is local. It actually starts local. You look at your school board. And you look at the people that are talking about curriculum that our children are going to be exposed to. You look at planning boards. You look at our aldermanic ward here. You look, it's shame on us Republicans for not putting up somebody to run against Mayor Donches, right? You can't just let these people walk around. All of a sudden now, just look at this Performing Arts Center now. It was $5 million when it started. Now it's $25 million.
Yeah.
Plus
a parking lot.
Plus parking lot. But we knew, Carl, that was going to happen.
Yeah.
We knew that because we are the conservative party. We understand fiscal restraints. We understand fiscal responsibility. And, a lot of times the problems that cities face and states face isn't about too little income. It's just too much spending. And we need to realize, what can we do that's going to benefit the city? And so for everybody that's out there, I know there are Republicans that are not happy with the governor for some of the things that he did. Look, he's our governor, and I back him 100%. You have to ask us, what is your alternative? Yeah. And right now we have him against, Dan Feltis, who now puts out TV ads that says he's not for an income tax. I remember we were in the State House and he was a state senator from Concord. He was pushing income taxes, right? Yeah. But now, because they're within 2 weeks of an election. Yeah, right. It's not a tax. Yeah, it's not an income tax. It's a fee on your wages. Right. So I don't know exactly what that means. But we have an opportunity on November 3rd to make a huge statement, not only in the great city of Nashua, but in the state of New Hampshire and across this country, to make a statement, to take a stand and say, we're not going to allow this. You know, you've had here in the state, you've had 2 years to try and work across the aisle. And what I saw in this legislative session was trying to undo everything that we did in the 16 to 18 legislative session.
Right.
And
that's why you got the veto.
Absolutely, right? Because we did put good legislation forward that benefited everybody. And now is because it really was not a pro New Hampshire vote, it was an anti-Republican vote. And they're the ones I think that have this venomous idea. We see it all the time from some of the current state legislators that put out some stuff that's just onerous. It's not helpful. It's always in a very argumentative way.
That's
and so
the word.
It is. And I'm really looking forward. Look, I won't, fool myself. We're not going to win 27 seats in the great state of New Hampshire. But let's start with 5. Right. Let's start with 10. And let's take back the House here in the state. And that's why in running for Congress, I want to get down to Washington because I believe the president is going to win again.
And then next year go after the aldermen.
Absolutely. It is about local. That's how you turn and keep your state worked in conjunction with the governor and with the legislative body. It's very clear what our Democrats in the city have tried to do. Thank goodness for Governor Sununu. And I know they want to couch it that it was in the best interest and that they do. I saw a post the other day, and I won't mention the state representatives' names, but I can't even see one word that she's ever said nice about another conservative state legislator. And so I think the time is now. I think it's important. At the rally yesterday with the president, we saw the energy. And as I said there when I spoke, I said, look, the polls can't quantify what's happening. This undertow of people that don't take polls but are behind the president, you can't quantify what's happening. But you look at a rally like this and you look around, and this is something that the Democrats aren't doing. I saw one today. I think Kamala Harris was supposed to be in Detroit. And if there were 20 people, it's amazing, right? Or Joe Biden, or even former President Obama when he was walking the street. So the polls are the polls.
You wonder how honest they are because you do see one or two outliers that say, we're looking at what the people are really thinking.
Right.
We're asking questions that really don't ask you, are you voting this way or that way, but just how you're thinking. And that's
right.
What they called the 2016.
Right. They were all wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And it's funny. When I was speaking at the rally, I say I wear a Trump Pence mask. Right. And I do that because, quite frankly, I welcome the dialogue. I do. I really do. Because I think when you actually sit and talk to somebody who's got this venomous position against the president, I can usually talk to them and say, okay, at the end of this 5-minute discussion, if you still have that position, that's fine, but you need to listen, right? Not once, Carl, and I've been wearing that mask a long time, 5-6 months, has anybody come up and challenged me while I was wearing that mask. But I tell you what does happen is my wife and I were at a restaurant, and I walk in and the guy looks at me and yells across the restaurant, I'm with you, buddy. I'm with Trump. Or I took the kids to Parker's for breakfast, right? And I put my mask down on the table, and the waiter looked at me and goes, I'm voting for him. I'm with you. And then the owner comes out and says, my wife and I are voting for you. Or voting for the president. So that's what I'm hearing. That's the anecdotal evidence that I have. I see these polls, if I believe what the polls were saying, I dig a hole and put my head in the sand. But that's not what we're hearing. That's not what we're hearing on the phones. Sure, we'll get hangups. I get that. It is a constitutional republic, and so people have a right to back whoever they want. But this kind of premature demise of our president, I think, is a bit early to do that. And I think that what we saw in 2016, when the question was Trump's path to 270, right, which is the number of electoral votes you need. And about 9:30, 9:45, people were saying, what's Clinton's path to 270? So they saw clearly that there was a point that the president was winning those swing states and that it was now Clinton that was in to see in trouble now. And I think that's what you're going to see this time coming around.
Really, it should be interesting.
It's going to be an amazing night. It's going to be an amazing night. You know, how long is it going to be?
He's doing one good thing. Right now, while we're talking, they're swearing in a new Supreme Court justice.
I know, and that's a great point. You know, today is history in the making that we have another fully qualified associate justice. You know, one of the issues that, you know, during the debate, Congresswoman Custer always talked about repealing the ACA or repealing the Roe v. Wade. And my position is, you know, that's how Democrats look at Supreme Court justices by case law.
Right.
They're not there to legislate.
Right.
They're there to interpret the Constitution. And I believe that hopefully by now, Associate Justice Barrett will interpret the Constitution as it was intended and not to legislate. But it's clear that they were afraid of previous case law. And that's just a peek underneath the tent of how they look at the Supreme Court. I think
it's always their question.
It is always their question, right? They want to look at overturning a previous Supreme Court ruling. You should be asking yourself, is this justice going to interpret the Constitution and a case that's brought before him or her on the merits of the case and how the Constitution applies to that case? But when they start singling out things in the past, it's because they believe it's about legislation and not about interpretation of the Constitution.
Taking that attitude, don't you think they should want to change the law?
Well, you know what?
That's the way it's supposed to work.
That's right. If you don't like the way the law is written, then you have a process where we have 3 separate but equal branches, right? In the legislative body, that's where you go do it, right? It's not from the bench,
and it's when it's written.
And when it's written, that's right. Absolutely, right? And so that's why they're so vehemently against this.
Right. And it's interesting how they interpret these things and how and that's why that we don't make they call themselves progressives, but I don't think we're progressive.
Yeah, they're more regressives, right? Is what they're right. They want to take us and they want to isolate us. Absolutely.
I mean, this state was a good example. We were cutting taxes. We were making more. We were having extra money there, and we had and we needed it now with this COVAX file. So I don't know. People ought to learn.
Absolutely. Well, November 3rd.
Okay, everybody get out and vote.
That's right.
And help out the people running for next year. We got another one next year.
That's right. Absolutely.
There'll be more local. We'll have more local issues, but we need all of you to get together and help us keep this state straight.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Carl.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.